Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, in my IT career, I'm going to be honest with you, I've encountered every kind of tech recruiter that you can imagine. But I did leave that corporate world behind 5 years ago when I decided to set up on my own, talk and write about technology instead of sitting in an office 9 till 5. Back when doing something like that was considered quite risky, maybe even reckless. But today, I want to bust a few myths and misconceptions about tech recruitment. And I also want to talk about bringing humanity back into recruitment and why it's more than just a numbers game. But as this is a tech podcast, we're going to explore the intricacies of tech recruiting right across the tech space and also including the most lucrative positions, insights from both the candidates and companies and what everyone is looking for. And it's a pretty big topic, but I found the perfect guest. His name is Giancarlo Hirsch and he's from a company called Glocomms, and he's kindly offered to come on here and share his insights and trends around recruitment tech too. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears directly to New York City and right in the heart of the conversation between me and Giancarlo. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about how you got here and share your origin story with everyone?
Totally. Well, thanks so much for having me, Neil. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. My name's Giancarlo Hirsch, and I obviously am a lead recruiter here over at the Phaidon International Group, managing one of our emerging technology businesses, Glocomms. My origin story is I born and raised in Brooklyn, grew up here in New York City. I went out to Los Angeles to play some basketball and studied actually cognitive science. Thought I wanted to maybe go into medicine. Found a role in construction to find a little bit of quick money out of college, and then looked to find a more promising career where I could actually scale and grow my career rather than just see how many hours I could spend on a job site. I stumbled upon Phaidon International, a small little 35-person business at the time here in New York that had landed about 2 years prior with only 6 members from the UK. And I immediately became inspired by the opportunity to set something up for myself. So I sort of stumbled into Phaidon International as an opportunity where I could bring very little skill set to the table, but continue to maintain a reasonably high 6-figure type earnings right out of a bachelor's degree back in 2013. That was not necessarily the standard, right? It felt like that was an upper echelon of earnings that I was getting access to by joining this company. And that was sort of the experience I had from the onset. So it was an exciting early run into my recruitment career.
Wow, what a cool origin story you got there. It had everything. Medical profession, basketball, construction. Yeah. It's almost a Netflix series waiting to happen, isn't it?
No, I mean, look, no one studies recruitment, right? No one gets out of high school thinking they might go into recruitment. So it's everyone has an interesting story. And I think it's interesting to consider, a bit of competitive nature, a bit of drive in terms of work ethic, and a bit of focus on making some money, I think, was, to be fair, one of the early origin stories when it comes to recruitment, right?
Yeah, 100% with you. And that's one of the reasons I asked the question as well. I think there's so much pressure on everyone to know exactly what they want to do from school or high school, etc. But I think we all find our way at different times, and it's stories like that that bring it to life. In fact, in over 2,000 interviews of this podcast, most people didn't set out thinking, I want a career in technology, but they all end up there. But of course, here in 2022, Glocomms specialises in securing business-critical talent in technology. Now, it is an incredibly crowded market. So what is it that makes you guys stand out from your competitors, would you say?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I think that's probably the biggest challenge we face, right, is how saturated and competitive the marketplace is. And I think, the way we look to position ourselves is that businesses all struggle with monetizing and securing data. And that's sort of the one line reason why Glocomms exists, is because in the end of the day, across industries, in an industry agnostic type of model across our various brands that specialize across certain industries, we are able to offer clients access to talent that is not readily available to them given how competitive that marketplace is, right? And specifically with respect to monetizing and securing data, we start to hone in on niche markets that are not necessarily as well established by some of our competitors, right? So when we look at a competitive tech landscape, there's actually a lot of volume and lower level type of roles that are part of that market where some of the biggest players in the space actually make the most amount of their revenues, right? A little bit more of a transactional, high turnover type of prospect, maybe more on the contract side. The business that I oversee is entirely permanent focused, working with enterprise to pre-IPO to stealth mode startups on scaling their business across 3 technical verticals: cybersecurity, data science, and of course, software development. And then we have a commercial services practice that help our customers on their go-to-market strategy. I talk a lot about how that commercial services practice spans horizontally across those 3 technical verticals to help software vendors, data vendors, and cyber vendors on their, I know I mentioned it before, go-to-market strategy. What I mean by that is product management and development, sales, marketing, and everything in between from pre, post, and technical sales, right? That's one of the main areas where I find that we have a great aptitude to get in with clients because of how niche that skill set is of a highly technical individual who can also be customer facing and go out and win that business. So by positioning ourselves in a sort of vendor and end user light where we work across both spectrums, across the 65-person business that I oversee, consultants that have micro specialized into more niche areas, and I can go into that in a little bit, have such a unique perspective on the market, right? So if we're thinking about the commercial services team working with one of the largest, let's call it security vendors out there, right? Let's just talk about firewalls because it's maybe one of the simplest cyber products, right?
Yeah.
A security, a bank is looking for very specific features in the firewalls or the hybrid environment of firewall technologies that they're looking to work with. And we're both working with those banks as well as, let's say, pharmaceutical companies off of the back of our Selby Jennings financial services business and our EPM life sciences, life sciences and pharma business, being able to help those end users integrate and navigate the sort of product landscape when it comes to where to buy, where to build, and what combination of the two is most effective, right? On the flip side of that, we're also going back and feeding information back to our vendor clients about what pharma companies are really looking for in these types of products versus where the financial services industry might differ a little bit in terms of some of the features that are most important to them, right? The way that the data is integrated into their platforms. So it's a pretty unique model from that perspective. And then when we go further to talk about the sort of niche skill sets with which we recruit in, I talked about data, software, cyber. Those are big overarching sort of comments, right? And I think the way that we break down each of those markets is also reasonably unique in a marketplace that everyone says they're micro specialized, right? But I think that the skill sets we choose to focus on are actually the ones that are the highest in demand and the least brokered, right? So in the security world, we sort of break it up into security engineering and product security. We talk about security operations, and then we talk a lot about information security, right? And each of those 3 teams have over 10 individuals that are focused within even more specialized aspects of each of those divisions, right?
Yeah.
On the software side, we break it into creative technology, core technology, and DevOps and cloud. One day I see an opportunity to have a 4th pillar being DevOps, cloud, and infrastructure. From my perspective, it's more of an organic growth model that has potentially, I don't want to say held us back because we're growing at almost 400% right now, but is the only thing that we are limited by, right? Is how quickly can we get new people into seats, bring them up to speed of becoming sort of subject matter experts, and then build out and scale out markets, right? So for now, DevOps, cloud, and automation and infrastructure sort of sits within software. And we've noticed it's actually moved towards much more of a software focused model, obviously with the DevOps space rather than more of that old core infrastructure type of model. So nonetheless, creative, core, and DevOps, automation, and cloud. The creative team's broken down even further into web, mobile, and UX design. Would love to talk about that market a little bit in later in the podcast. I think that's one of the markets that we see a huge amount of opportunity in and a huge amount of transformation over the last, I don't even think more than 3 years even, right? Yeah. So really up and coming there. And then when we go to the data space, obviously a widespread comment there, data. But we talk a lot about the data scientists, obviously, that are statistical modelers building models to create either more performance systems or to create predictive analytical models. And we talk about machine learning specialists, right? People who build artificial intelligence, computer vision, and highly performant algorithms to, again, make systems more, let's just say, intelligent or responsive, or make it so that the car doesn't hit the pedestrian when they walk across the street. And then we talk a lot about data engineering. And now data engineering just sort of slaps right against the core software practice, because now we're just talking about pipelining data in a software environment. And the fact that these business units and their end sort of niche markets are so tangential to one another is what, I don't want to say proves, but really makes clear how deep into these markets we are, and sort of speaks to the way that we don't do a lot of things that are also included in, quote, technology and tech recruiting, right? So it's this very niche build, computer science, fundamental type of background that spans across those three technical markets that I think positions us in a reasonably unique fashion.
And it's such an exciting space to be in at the moment. And there's so much talk around digital skill shortage right now. And I think there's even predicted something like 3 million unfilled cybersecurity roles alone. So I got to ask, what skill shortages are you noticing, and how are you helping businesses overcome these challenges when they're looking for people in these roles when there isn't enough people to fill them?
Totally. So I'll start with cybersecurity because you mentioned it, and then I'd love to speak on the sort of creative technology, sure, UX design, and creative space a little bit as well. So from a security perspective, I'd say that there are two pertinent skill sets that don't exist that everyone needs. So we'll start with the one where we're talking about building proactive security features, embedding that into software systems from a product development standpoint, right? Where in the life cycle do we perform those sort of tasks? And how do we not get in the way of the awesome, inspiring leaders that are driving this product development to be able to get that market to customers as quickly as possible, right? And so the ability to really work technically with some of these engineers and understand from a product-driven standpoint how to deliver product in a marketplace, while also being able to have the technical acumen to decipher whether or not, from a security standpoint, this product is viable, right, or is resilient in a place where, there's going to be attacks, there's going to be opportunity for customer and personal details to be accessible out there. What are some of the measures that we're putting in place? So that individual comes from an exceptionally technical background who has built out a focus into the security space. And I would say, is a highly under-brokered space where they're making 45% more, well, maybe that's a little exaggeration, 25% more than their counterparts in a year per year of experience sort of conversation, right? So if you are a highly performant software engineer who is interested in the opportunities of securing products as they grow, you can make a whole lot more money if that's sort of the trajectory you go down. And I think that we've seen that be a market that has boomed. Another one is sort of interestingly on the flip side of that, much less technical, if you will, right? So from a compliance, regulatory, and sort of governance standpoint, right, there are all of these measures that have been put in place over the last few years that did not exist prior, based on the newfound understanding of data protection and privacy and where and how to store all this information. So big enterprise customers, right, the financial institutions, the large life sciences institutions, the large players in the supply chain industry through our DSJ brand, they are all playing catch up on what should be a proactive compliance and regulatory measure. So in that immediate, desperate need for talent that is only recently becoming readily available, because a lot of the new, security certifications that are required for, NIST framework and compliance guidelines, these are reasonably modern over the last, decade or so. So there's not a plethora of talent out there that has been in this seat, right? So what's interesting while it's a desperate need from a client's perspective, it's also an incredible opportunity from a candidate's perspective who might want to sort of reposition their career, whether they come from more of an operational risk background and have been on the second line, or whether they come from more of a compliance and regulatory background, or even have a legal background, but sort of have always worked in a business forward type of role. Maybe they now take an interest and are liking to some of these security features, go out, get some of these certifications, and can pivot your career over a 3-4 year time frame and get into what's next, right? So I think that poses an interesting sort of situation opportunity on both sides from a security perspective. Now, on the sort of creative technology piece, and I know I mentioned it a couple of times, I'm always eager to chat about it.
Yeah,
I think it boils down to the new sort of metaverse, if you will, right? And the web 3.0 and the digital world out there, and how customers interact with technology, right? And so whether it be a virtual reality headset from the Oculus group at Facebook, or even just how you look at the Nike website when you're looking to design some new pair of sneakers, the way that the customer experiences that technology and then in turn can potentially make transactions and purchase things, right, is something that I think is posing a newfound territory in the forever emerging space of technology, right? So one of the areas that we've seen that's most in demand, that has the least amount of talent readily available, is in the UX design and product design space, focused heavily on, customer acquisition, customer experience, and how the technology plays in with that customer.
And as you said there, it is an excellent time for anyone to explore a career in tech. And you've just given a couple of really good avenues for people who maybe are unsure of what they want to do or want to go down and pursue a career where there is huge demand for those skills. So for that person that's listening and thinking of making a switch, is there any advice you can offer on what skills that they should be going out and getting, and how people can make that transition to a career in tech a little bit easier on themselves?
Totally. I mean, I think some of what we do at its core requires some of the sort of core computer science fundamentals. And I think sometimes that can be one of the most challenging pieces to pick up on. Now, I think there's a lot of great sort of academies and workshops and classes out there that you can take to sort of start to get yourself involved. But where the skill set can sort of be maximized, I'd argue, is actually within this sort of creative space, right? Because it doesn't actually require some of the underlying object-oriented programming type of principles that are needed to be able to build performance software systems. In fact, you can just think more like a human being, right? And how does human interaction, and how does the technology interact with the human? Writing JavaScript code and designing and setting up web environments or product environments is much less sort of technical, if you will, in some capacity, or requires a bit less of a just fundamental technology background, where I think that offers people a huge opportunity to pivot careers or jump in, having, again, studied something in college that they didn't necessarily pursue in their career, right? You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, everyone in technology did not set out to be a technologist. And I think right now, that's probably the first step that I'd take if I was interested in getting my hands on a keyboard.
And as for yourselves there, I mean, what are the intricacies of recruiting in the tech space right now? Is there anything you can share around that?
Yeah, totally. I think we can talk about, let's say, sort of the COVID market, right? And then sort of like maybe where we're at now and on sort of what I guess we could call the back end of this COVID market, but it still feels somewhat similar and volatile in its own right. So, when things started to potentially, unfortunately, take a turn down back in March of 2020, what we recognized was that a lot of the external investors, right? Because we work with, like I mentioned, pre-IPO, stealth mode startups, as well as the biggest household names on the street, right? So, we've noticed across both spectrums sort of how it's been impacted. I think the first toughest part was when venture capitalists and private equity companies stopped, writing checks. And there was definitely a few months where that occurred. And the companies that were strapped by debt, that were in need of growing and scaling, some were able to become really successful, and unfortunately some were not able to make it through. And that was a bit of an unwavering time for a few months there. But what quickly happened was exactly what I mentioned, right? The people who were building the most cutting edge technology, the people who were, driving some of the work from home initiatives and the opportunity to maintain an economic environment during these unprecedented times through technology, actually stood up stronger than ever, right? And so that was actually an exciting time for us here at Glocomms internally within the organization, where Glocomms has really just sort of taken off since then. When I mentioned a 400% growth rate over the last 2 years, that's a lot of that is in part because of the markets that the COVID environment have produced, where talent is extremely difficult to come by. People are looking to work from entirely remote environments often. Comps and salaries have gone aggressively through the roof. Not that I guess there is a roof, since they're still going up, but just the change in the market has positioned technologists in such a valuable way, to be fair. So now, obviously, on the back end here, we're sort of seeing a bit of volatility in the tech giants, right? And I think while a few are showing some of this sort of need to, unfortunately, release some of the talent and manage some of their costs, I think it more boils down to just managing financial books that these companies have, rather than speaking to the nature of how in need these talented professionals are, right? Because we find such an opportunity to be able to move from one environment or industry to another, whether it be a big tech social media platform moving into an autonomous vehicle space where you're working with some new cutting edge electric vehicle company, right? So the same skill sets power a multitude of industries, and that offers us an opportunity in and of itself, right? As a large amount of impressive candidates become readily available, right? On the flip side of that, there are also the large tech players that we are working with to this day that are showing no signs of wavering whatsoever, right? So I think that it's all based on whether you have more of a subscription model or more of a long-lasting product that will probably never go away for the next 100, 200 years. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Yeah, it really does. And something else I try and do on this podcast every day is give the guest an opportunity to try and bust a few myths or misconceptions around the industry they're working in. I suspect there's a few myths and misconceptions in the recruiting industry, but is there anything that you can finally lay to rest today that might frustrate you?
I love that. I love it. I think, look, recruiters don't get the best name sometimes because often recruitment agencies operate in what is an exceptionally transactional manner. And we're talking about human beings, right? All I do every day is interact with humans, whether it's candidates externally, clients externally, or the 65-person team here, right? And we just work together to create a network where we can continue to build relationships, right? Sales in its nature. But it feels like sort of a middle role where, why would you get a fee if you're just moving one person from here to here, right? And on the flip side of that, when you can offer such a really white glove type of service to a candidate and to a client, I think that it really becomes inspiring for individuals who work here, but also for me who sees it from sort of my perspective. It's like we're making such a widespread impact on a community, whether it be from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, helping customers hire people earlier in their sort of company's lifespan so that the leadership grows in accordance with that, rather than taking a focus on that later on in their company's life cycle. So I think the main misconception that I feel recruiters get is just, middle people, right? Sort of salespeople in the middle, and not really offering a huge amount of value. And I think that if you work with a great recruiter who really takes the time to understand your underlying motivators and reasons for looking for a change, or even reasons for being open to a change, right? Because a lot of the candidates we work with are definitely not active. They're not applying for our jobs. They're gainfully employed at at wherever, right? Looking to continue to scale their career. And we come in with something that's just so impressive that maybe they'd be interested in taking a conversation, right? And so just the value that having an external resource who has the knowledge across the markets can provide to you as a candidate. And then on the flip side, what that offers a client from a developing their business from a talent perspective, I think is pretty unique and doesn't get recognized as well as it should be. So I always recommend that whether you're going to work with us or anyone, a recruitment agency is definitely the way I would recommend looking for a new job, because I think it gives you an opportunity to hear from a third party who, sure, we're a bit biased and have our skin in the game and want you to be most interested in our clientele. But if you do it the right way over years, you're building relationships with people that I think it's so long lasting that it's not about making the placement. It's about understanding the market and understanding the individuals within that market that make the world go round. Right. So,
yeah. No, completely agree with you on that. And as this is a tech podcast, a question I've got to ask you, are there any particular tech trends that excite you or anything that you're monitoring closely at the moment?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the blockchain and crypto markets are exciting given the volatility. I think that what really excites me is the underlying technologies that power some of those systems and how they can impact the widespread economy in the world. So that's where I think that technology is going to go over the next 10 years, is sort of this underlying embedded blockchain that can really power a lot of different industries in different ways, stabilize them, offer unique solutions that weren't previously available. So I think that's obviously one of the most interesting and like visible trends.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. I think that's one of the more challenging problems out there. And when you talk about, I know I mentioned attracting passive talent, what is it that get people out of their seat in the morning? It's really access to proprietary data and challenges, right? And the problems that are posed to individuals in roles that are focused on sort of building autonomous vehicles and creating the next generation of transportation, I think are some of the most challenging ones out there, and that drives, people's motivations, but also will drive the trends in the industry a little bit. And then I guess lastly, I mentioned the creative space, right? The sort of new web environments out there that feel a lot more interactive and real, the metaverse, if you will, and just sort of that whole concept of the next layer of the digital world, right? It's not about the cell phones on your ear anymore, or even in your hand. It's, I don't really know, but it's going to become even more integrated into our lives, where it will feel even more seamless, right? And I think that's exciting.
And where do you think all that will lead? What's to come next for recruiting in tech? Is that something that you're monitoring and always thinking, oh, well, this could all take shape in a certain way in the future?
Yeah, I think, again, to the markets that we cover and the skill sets that we hone in on, they're the most valuable out there. So they are very transferable with respect to what problem is trying to be solved, right? If you're exceptionally capable from a statistical analysis and quantitative modeling standpoint, right, as a data scientist, then it doesn't matter what environment that data is in, or what problem you're trying to solve. You can still produce the same type of logic and algorithms to generate the outcome or sort of activity that you need for that product to be successful, right? So I think that we monitor it and we are interested in it, and it is exciting for us from a always growing standpoint, right? Because that's the thing about technology. It's unlike a lot of the industries that people recruit in. Technology is ever emerging, so it's always what's next, right? It's never what there was. And so I guess while it poses its challenges in terms of how things move around, the motion is actually what's so exciting about the market.
And what about yourselves at Glocomms? What's your big focus right now? Is there anything you can share on what you're focusing on now or the road ahead?
Yeah, so I think look, I've probably spoken a bit about across the board what we're really focusing on, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the cybersecurity stuff that's out there is becoming more and more prevalent and widespread, and is becoming, just businesses are becoming more involved and comprehensive of how important it is to focus on that. So the cyber markets are sort of incredible, as you mentioned, right? There's so many openings that there's not enough people out there that know how to do these jobs, right? So definitely that's one of the main focal points for us across various industries. I think this creative space I mentioned, but I think when you really think about it, it's more just about how we can hire as many people as possible so that we can touch as many lives as possible. Because while we've, like I said, grown at a tremendous rate over the last bunch of years to a 65-person business, we're just at the beginning of this journey, right? This marketplace is ginormous, right? Well, so how many dollars are spent every year on hiring top technology talent, right? So I think the endless opportunity and the internal inspiration for individuals here at Phaidon International and Glocomms in particular to be able to spearhead your career and drive success and grow yourself into a leadership seat. We have people here who have been less than a year and a half that have teams of 5, right? And are insanely successful 18 months out of their bachelor's degree, right? And whatever it is, as we mentioned. So I think the internal opportunity for people and the growth that Glocomms can have across the 4 markets we currently cover, a potential 5th vertical in cloud, I think we can be a 500-person business in only 5 years' time, right? When I joined Phaidon International, the US was a 35-person business, and there's now over 800 individuals in 7 offices. So I feel very passionately about the 55 people, now 65, but the 55 people who were about 2 months ago who have been here, right, for the last few years. What does it look like in 5 years from now to go from 50, 55 to 500, right? And having that additional amount of resources around you to, attract new talent, work with new customers, and really continue to cross-contaminate and share across the business, we position ourselves in a really unique spot internally at Phaidon International to potentially be one of the largest revenue-generating brands and catch up with some of the businesses that have been around for more than twice as long as us, but also to continue to offer a really unique offering in what is a highly saturated tech recruiting space, right? And continue to really drive the success for some of the customers that we work with that are clearly appreciative.
Now, I've loved chatting with you today, but I always like to ask my guests to leave everyone listening with a personal note of inspiration and maybe a bit of a story. So can I ask you what your favourite song is, or a song that has inspired you or helps you get your head in the zone? Something we can add to our Spotify playlist. All I ask is that you give us a story or a reason behind your choice. What's it going to be?
Absolutely, Neil. I appreciate the question. I love this song. So a lot of different perspectives on the song. In fact, I've learned that potentially the songwriter was not in the happiest place when he was writing this song, but that is not the reason I love this song by any means. I grew up listening to this song. My father loved to play this song for me, and it's inspired me to want to grow a career and build a life that is reasonably simple and happy, but also by the water, near the boats with my family. And so the song that I love, that inspires me, I like to listen to it when I'm going for long runs, just sort of keeping my head in the game, is Sitting on the Dock of a Bay by Otis Redding.
Yeah, what a song.
And just love the way that tune goes.
And what was the story behind that? Why he wasn't in a good place? I didn't know the story behind it.
I didn't really know the story behind that either, but apparently he was sort of in somewhat of a depressed light and wasn't feeling great. And when he was sitting by the dock on the bay, he wasn't as happy as I'm going to be when I'm sitting on the dock by the bay.
Oh man, I wish I could crack out some creativity like that when I was having a bad day. But
yeah, sure.
Before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about anything we've talked about today, find Glocomms online and contact you or your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, I mean, look, our website, glocomms.com, glocomms.com is the best place to find some of the opportunities we have available, get some material about how we work with customers and the offerings that we provide. And from a personal standpoint, Giancarlo Hirsch, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is one of the best professional social networks out there, and one of the main ones we use to chat and connect with people in our network. So please feel free to connect with me and message me, and I'm always up for a quick chat myself personally, or one of the experts in the markets. Obviously, over the years, we've grown to a point where some of these folks are even a bit more knowledgeable about their markets than I am at times. So would love to get people in touch with the right people and help anyone that's interested. If you're interested in maybe pursuing a career in recruitment, would love to talk to you about why I take pride in putting recruiter down when people ask what I do, because it feels good. And, maybe I'm a sales director at this point, but really I'm a recruiter at heart, and it's a great job to have.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And I always say at the end of every episode, technology works best when it brings people together. And I've loved chatting with you today about busting some of those misconceptions of recruiting in the tech industry, and also the perspective there of bringing humanity back into recruiting, and why it's more than just a numbers game, and also what's to come in the recruiting in tech. And not only that, you shared a fantastic origin story that's just a Netflix series waiting to happen, and also a great song too. But thanks for sharing that with me today.
Hey, thanks so much, Neil. I really appreciate the time, and look forward to any connections we make from here.
A huge thank you to today's guest, who will be forever known as One Take GC between you and me. But I can't thank him enough for coming on and sharing his insights around securing business critical talent in technology. Do you work in recruitment, or do you have any experiences in the recruitment industry that you'd like to share with me? Whatever it is, I'd love to point the microphone in your direction, get your voice heard on here too. And you know the drill by now. techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, just at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So today was all about recruitment, or should I say recruitment tech, and securing business critical talent in the tech industry. But what we're going to talk about tomorrow, I hear you say. Well, I'm spinning the wheel of misfortune. Where it stops, nobody knows. But what I can promise you is it will be a completely different industry, and I'll have another guest lined up. If you want to find out more, simply tune in and join me here again, same time, same place tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.